reason I chose this topic is significant. And before I start, I would like to recall the very words of President Putin, who said in February, and I will read it to you because it's worth thinking about it. President Putin says, "We have yet to learn, as many Western partners have, how to lobby for decisions that favor Russian business interests in foreign international forums. The challenges facing us in this area, given our priority of innovation-driven development, are very serious. To achieve equal standing for Russia in the modern system of global economic ties and to minimize the risk arising from integration in the world economy, including Russia's membership in WTO and its forthcoming accession to the OCDE. So far," President Putin says, "Russian economic actors have been getting a raw deal abroad. Restrictive trade and political measures are being taken against them, and technical barriers are being erected that put them at a disadvantage compared with their competitors." And the President continues by saying, "Our investors are not welcome abroad and are often pointedly brushed aside. All this leads to the conclusion that Russia must strengthen its political and diplomatic support for Russian entrepreneurs in foreign markets and to provide more robust assistance to major landmark business projects. The government and business associations should better coordinate their efforts in the foreign economic sphere, more aggressively promote the interests of Russian business and help it to open new markets." This is your president speaking in February 2012. And based on that, and based on what is taking place currently with regards to Gazprom, I thought that this would be, for this Congress, a very good topic to talk about. And I will try, in the time that is allocated to me, to point out what has changed now in the European landscape. We used to, Russia used to have chief lobbyists in Europe, in the name of Sarkozy, in the name of Berlusconi, and in the name, of course, of Angela Merkel. Landscape has changed today. Berlusconi is no more, Sarkozy is no more, Holland is trying to find his ways, and there is a great deal of turbulence. But that doesn't mean that we don't have friends anymore. Russia still has friends in Europe. It's a matter of getting access to them and telling them the Russian side of the story. That means lobbying. For definition purposes, and because lobbying has been such a word that has been misinterpreted, I tend to think that we should use the word public policy advocacy. Public policy advocacy, which is a better word really than lobbying. Secondly, there is also a site which I have launched, which is called www.globalaffairs.com and globalgovernmentaffairs.com. And on globalgovernmentaffairs.com you will see my entire presentation as well. The subject is of immense importance because you have about 400 affiliates of Russian companies operating in both Western Europe and Central and Eastern Europe. So it's very important. Many times, and this corroborates with what I just read to you from the presidency, from Mr. Putin, people have not sufficiently maybe understood the importance of lobbying the decision makers, not only at the European level, but in the member states where they operate. That's very important. So we will examine ways that this can be achieved, both at the European level and at the member state level. One best case, best practice, from my point of view, and coming from Brussels, is the case of Lukoil. Lukoil has done a fantastic job in belonging to the right association. Issued an accredited lobbyist in the European Parliament. I maintain the name because it's a good recognition, but it's Association of Lobbyists to the European Union. And what Pavel was talking about is that we're going to enter into an agreement between your association and ALEP, as well as between your association and the recently formed International Public Policy Advocacy Association, which was created recently and currently is Washington-based. All right, the subject, Russian cooperations abroad. Okay. The importance of the topic is obvious. You know, Russia is a third trading partner of the EU, and the EU is the first trading partner of Russia. So we are tied together. And I recall Mr. Sarkozy was recently welcomed by President Putin, and there was a sort of complicity between the two gentlemen. And he says, you know, Vladimir, I had told you, Russia needs Europe and Europe needs Russia. And he was right. Then going back to the imports, of course, substantial imports and substantial exports, missing cars, medicines, car parts, telephone parts, tractors, etc. EU is the largest foreign investors in Russia, 120 billion, and Russia investments in the EU about 42 billion. Okay, next. Okay, importance of the topic based on the recent accession of Russia to the WTO. Russian multinational corporations are market-seeking. They set up operations abroad to better service existing foreign demand and increase the potential customer base for their products. So if you look at where they are, you've got about 450 foreign affiliates in Eastern Europe and Central Asia and other Europe. Mostly EU, 38%, and the CIS countries, 22%. That means that EU plus CIS, and you're over 50% of the investments of Russia abroad. Of course, as you know, there is a greater tendency today to look at Asian countries, and numerous trips have been taken either by Mr. Medvedev or by Mr. Putin to try to expand and increase market share in Asia. Okay, next. The challenge for Russian MNS, multinational corporations. That's very important here. Number one, adaptation to the foreign social and economic environment. Building relations with local communities. There is still a negative perception of Russian business which is reinforced by mass media and stereotypes about corruption and other ugly traits. We will see, this is happening here. I was on Russia Today on television on several occasions. You have to tell the story. If they tell lies, you have to correct the story. Not passively accepting those stereotypes. Negative perceptions hinders the negotiation of investment deals with local authorities. They complicate the relations with trade unions. They make the recruitment of skilled staff more difficult. And it's my opinion that multinational corporations, Russian multinational corporations, need to implement large-scale programs to form a favorable corporate image with the local population. I consider three types of risk: transfer risk, operational risk, and ownership control risk. Okay? Strategy to get benefits from the political environment. Okay? Several strategies possible. Okay? We have Russian companies may pursue either individual or collective action, either direct or indirect avenue, either collective or private benefits. So I distinguish several possible strategy. They do it alone, that's leader strategy. They belong to a trade association, and so they are follower strategy. They have an information influence strategy that tries to bring expertise to policymakers. They have an entrepreneurial strategy through grassroots mobilization. They have a private goods strategy where they try to seek public policies that confer unique benefits. And then they have a public exposure strategy through media campaigns. But because the subject of lobbying is not so well ingrained in the Russian culture, there is a tendency to think that when you're operating abroad, you can only achieve what it is that you want to achieve by having access to the top people, which is not necessarily true. You have to deal with high people, high-level people, medium-level people, and low-level people. And sometimes you get more help by dealing with the middle level than you get from the top level. Next. Corporate political activities hinges on 4 strategic capabilities that you must have. 1, ability to identify clear and focused policy goals. 2, ability to develop relationships and credibility in the policy process. 3, understanding the nature of the policy process and institutional access. And then 4th, least but not last, looking for natural allies and alliance to develop profile and access. That should be the core capabilities to engage in any kind of political activity. Okay. Application of this to the Russian multinational corporations. Russian companies need to maintain a bargaining power position stronger than that of the host country. Development of good relations with the host government and other political groups, lobbying and advocacy for shaping and influencing the political decisions. And this EU market is a very complex, multi-layer environment with both national and regional context. And what Russian companies experience is not unlike what other countries are experiencing, which is very complex. The EU is a complex system. And when you come from outside of the EU and you try to see how you can navigate the system, it's not very easy. Okay, so that means that you have to work both at the supranational level as well as at the member state level. Okay. Now, for example, let's look at the EU level. Okay, you can work either via the parliament of the host country, and I put here the greater the number of member states the Russian companies is operating in, the larger number of members of the European Parliament might have in supporting the company's interest. Okay, so a company that that is present maybe in 40 countries, obviously you have to deal with the different member states where Lukoil is currently operating. Need to align the company's policy preference with domestic firms of the EU member states. And then the second level is via the Commission. And if you are in accordance with, if your strategy is in conformity with the integration concepts, the better. Of course, you will want to target both institutions. That is, at the European Parliament level, at the member state level, at the Commission level. Okay, next. Before we go further, I'd like to point out that if you take the 27 member states, we have people that are friends and we have people that are not so friendly. And I say we to Russians. The most hostile are Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, Latvia, a little bit less. They are hostile. Okay? We have the best advocate currently is Germany. Italy is trying to shape its position right now with Mario Monti. French are trying to solve their own problems. So it's the world game has changed. The landscape that used to be is no longer the same. That doesn't mean that job cannot be done. I'm here in Moscow, and as I explained to the chairman before we started, I'm deeply concerned with the current investigation being carried out by the European Commission, DG Competition, vis-à-vis Gazprom. Because in Brussels you only hear one side of the story. And I hope very much that during my stay here, short stay, I will be able to convince the Gazprom leaders, decision makers, of the value of telling the Russian story. Now you have to understand that this whole exercise was triggered by Poland and Lithuania. And I think it's important to tell the record straight. The competition is adamant about carrying on the investigation. As you know, President Putin has declared that Gazprom was a foreign strategic enterprise, was a Russian strategic enterprise. And as such, if the Commission were to ask for information, they will not reveal any information unless they got clearance from the federal government. Of course, people are going to do everything. My personal view is that if the European Commission believe that they can get billions of euros from Gazprom as Straf, they are kidding themselves. Okay? They are very much kidding themselves. Because Gazprom is not going to pay any Straf at all. And if you look objectively, and that's what I have done as a matter of fact, and you take every allegation of the Commission against Gazprom, this is a Russian story. Why, for example, Poland and Lithuania and those countries benefited from discounted prices? Because of history, because those countries were part of Comecon. So they could get gas at a lower price. Anyway, I'm not going to go into a technical discussion, but I'm saying for every argument that is made by the European Commission, you can bring about a counterclaim and show that this is not true. This is not true. I think that I read yesterday on flying back that Gazprom, in any case, is going to launch the South Stream pipeline. Gazprom is continuing its way. And I think that this is not the time, in any case, for the Commission, which is trying to reinforce relations with Russia, to engage in such a case. I think it's not productive. It's absolutely not productive. Especially at this time when Europe is in a bad economic situation, we need to establish and reinforce the partnership with Russia and not try to antagonize Russia and not try to sue Russia. I mean, this is unbelievable to me. Okay, then going back now to the activities of GR activities. Many activities, monitoring issues, managing priorities. Those, by the way, would apply as well within the domestic context here in Russia. Building critical relationships, educating the public, supporting informed and unbiased public policy decision, facilitating business opportunity through coordination, active participation in bilateral and multilateral dialogues. Those are the kind of GR activities that, are standard for any companies that engage in political. Okay. As I mentioned to you, from my perspective, Lukoil is the best practice. The reason, first of all, they have a very substantial staff in Brussels. They do things right. They do things first class. They maintain a high company image. They ensure the required transparency of their operation. They monitor very actively the legislative process in the area of the fuel and energy complex. They analyze the competition policies in the EU markets. they're proactive in terms of ecological requirements for the oil and gas business. But more importantly, they know how to present their case. Association, bringing together all the employers' organization, and they create events like we have today here in Moscow, where they bring and invite MEPs, members of the European Parliament and others. They do things right. They understand very well. As Russian companies expand abroad, they need to incorporate public policy issues into their management approach, which they have not done sufficiently. And I hope that maybe through the GR Congress, we will be able to have a special workshop where in-house or outside, where we will invite many representatives of companies, and we will try to have them working on a case-by-case that incorporate those public policy issues. Secondly, it is critical to understand the goals and mechanism of government decision makers wherever they operate. Okay? Third, it is necessary to have a basic understanding of legislation and politics, especially how government works, but also the regulatory challenges involved in doing business overseas. There, they need help. A sophisticated understanding of government's relevance is critical to engage successfully with government policies that affect their companies. See, what has happened is this: you have had over 450 affiliates. They operate all over Europe. They come in, they put their money on the table, they invest in companies or create joint ventures, and they kind of, I'm talking about Russian companies, they try not to get too much involved in this lobbying or public policy advocacy. They meet the president of the Chamber of Commerce, they meet several key people, but that's not part of their thinking. And I'm suggesting that it should be more an increasing part of their thinking. Okay. Another recommendations in today's business environment, I postulate, which is increasingly mediated by national governments. And understanding of Russian public policy has never been more important for Russian business. It's true. In order to prepare Russian business leaders to better understand, shape, and succeed in the dynamic interaction between business and government in the global economy, consideration should be seriously given to the setting up, that's my idea, of a Center for Global Business and Government, combining the skills of both GR specialists and business executive. I don't have the time, but I'm thinking of something here. You know that increasingly business schools all over the world actually are integrating as part of the MBS programs courses in public policy advocacy. Because now, unfortunately, you have all over the world, you have increased regulations, increased pressures, increased demand being made on business. So, although public advocacy up until now was not part of any curriculum in business schools, you had the people that were studying either political science, law, what have you, and on the other side you had the people that were studying for business. And it's very interesting that now most programs at Harvard, at George Washington University, at INSEAD in Fontainebleau in France, but also probably it's the direction that's going to be taken in Russia as well. Why not have some courses in business school, in Russian business school, that bring in some modules that discuss public policy advocacy? To me it makes sense. Because as future business leaders, they're going to be confronted with those public policy advocacy issues in any case. Building relationship with governments and reporting directly, effectively to a changing regulatory environment is a critical element of competitive strategy. This is both to help shape and inform regulatory policy, as well as ensure proper understanding of the context and intent of the regulation as they are introduced. Understanding of the political environment and how it might affect the company's ability to do business is a core competence. Core competence. Developing relationship with governments more akin to a partnership, because that's what we're witnessing. Since governments don't have the solutions, all the solutions, and also because of finances, we are seeing more and more so-called public-private partnership. That's good. That's very good, because government decision makers can work for the business side, and business side can work for the government, and together they can be successful in bringing about change. And then the last point was being aware of changes in policy wherever companies operate and how this might affect them. The future of Russia as a modern nation directly depends on its involvement in the globalization process. That's a given. In order to maintain its core national interest in the increasingly globalized world, Russia needs to significantly boost its presence in the global arena. That will enable it to play a much more crucial role in the definition of its prestige and influence than before. In this endeavor, government relations is called upon to play a major role. So here, as attendants and participants in this GR Congress, don't see your role as being solely limited to public advocacy or business-state relationship within the confines of Russia. Your challenge and your future lays on a more broader basis on a global basis, not only being focused on Russia. Okay? Because the world has changed. The world has changed greatly. We have come to a new world now. And I feel that our profession can be a change agent. We have to educate the public about what we do. We have to be transparent. We have to show integrity in what we do. You will see the code later on. I will talk to you about this recently formed International Public Policy Advocacy Association, which is trying to bring together everybody in the profession on a global basis, because we share a lot of other issues. We share many issues together. Of course, every government relations strategy is dependent on the socio-political environment in which you operate. Russia is not USA. USA is not Canada. Canada is not France. But I think there are many things that we can agree on standards of practice together from throughout the world. And that was it. Thank you very much, President. I'm willing to answer any question you may have. Please let me know if you have any questions. And the EU embassy will call the shots. If you take, for example, let's take Russia. You got 27 states that are represented here through their embassies. And of course you got the representation of the EU to Moscow, to Russian Federation. But I don't think that any one of the 27 is going to let the EU delegation to the Russian Federation speak for itself. You have to appreciate that, especially with the crisis, we have seen it. We are far from a federated state, federal state. You have two types of people in Europe right now. You have those that say yes, we are for more federal government, and there are others that say, hey, we have lost enough of our sovereignty. We don't want anymore. And this has been compounded, by the way, by the economic crisis. When the boat is sinking, everybody thinks for himself. So the French are thought for himself, the Portuguese are thought for himself. They try to set Greece. Situation is very difficult right now. People are getting tired. Yesterday as I left Brussels, it was like war zone. Because there was another council, another one, every time, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every 1 month, they come. They disturb you, by the way, because they fly with their helicopter, they block all the streets, people cannot move around. I was trying to take the bus to the airport, couldn't even take the bus because the bus, of course, had to change its route. And if
you had results out of it, it would be a different story. But it's always the same. So going back to the Russian situation, what have the Russians done? Well, the Russians have done exactly what Americans or the others have done. They're working on a bilateral basis because they're not getting from the EU the type of response they would like to get. So it has to be a two-pronged approach, as I said before, working at the European level and working at the member state level. But many people are very wary about giving even more sovereignty to the European Union, because they lose sovereignty. If you take France, 80% of the regulations in EU, it comes from Brussels, 80%. That means that the French Duma equivalent, or Italian Duma, they have not a very interesting job. They only transpose into their national system what has come from Brussels. Budget. Budget now, 3%, the 3% golden rule. That means that, like a good student, you have to submit to teacher your budget for next year. And it is somebody in the European Commission that decide if you pass or if you don't pass. Because that is not democratic. The President of the European Commission is not elected. The President of the European Central Bank is not elected. The President of the Council is not elected. So when the Europeans try to tell you, Russia, give you some lessons about democracy, tell them about their style of democracy, because to me, it's not really democratic. The only democratic body that we have is this European Parliament, which represents the people. I hope that down the road, under pressure from the citizens, the President of the Commission will be elected by the people, that the President of the Council will be elected by the people. Now, the guy in charge of budget happens to be Olli Rehn, is his name. He's from Finland. Let's take Belgium.